Good morning. Come on. Give me a break. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your participation in the first 5 minutes of class. I'll join you here with the rest. Actually, you are going to participate the first few minutes of class, because what I'd like to ask you to do is turn to a partner and just think about something that maybe we don't think about all the time. Turn to a partner and just see, I'll give you, 45 seconds for this. See how many of the names of your great-grandparents that you can remember. The names of your great-grandparents. So not your mom and dad, not your grandparents, but your great-grandparents. How many of their names can you remember? Give you about 45 seconds. Find a partner and just see how many you can remember. About 15 seconds. And we're back. All right, so just out of sheer, unadulterated curiosity, anybody in here knows the names of all of your great-grandparents? Anybody? Anybody? Knows the names of all of your great-grandparents? That's impressive, Terry. And you know their birthdays. That's not just impressive, that is... I am impressed. I am impressed too. So my next question is, anybody in here kind of into, and I think we may already have one answer, but anybody in here that into genealogy, your family genealogy as a hobby? Okay, got a few folks. You run into brick walls though, don't you? A lot of times you just kind of run into brick walls. I just know if I can get past that brick wall, I will find out that I am the heir to I am the rightful king of England. I just know that. I feel it. Even though that is sort of a handicap, but it was not to them, because they're all actually German background. But anyway, that's another story for another day. All right, so genealogy. We kind of do this stuff. We kind of want to know where we come from. But amazingly enough, though we're interested in where we've come from, there's something about, it doesn't take long to start losing that information, does it? It just doesn't take long for that information to just sort of slip through the cracks of our memory, which at my age are multiple. But genealogy has its place, just thinking about where we came from, because there's a sense in which that's what roots us. And if the marriage and family therapy people are right, that shapes us more than we know, much more than we know. Whether we know it or not, and sometimes we do know it. I don't know how many of you have had the experience I know a lot of people have it. There are things that you are never going to do once you become a parent, right? I am never going to do that, and then you open your mouth and your mother comes out, you open your mouth and your father comes out, and you're just like, where did that come from? It's genealogy. It's because it's not only covering what is passed down to us genetically, but it's also the people we've hung around with shape who we are. And of course, they've been shaped by the people they grew up with and hung around with, and on and on and on. So there are these these lines both genetically and I guess you might say sociologically that were shaped by those people we have come from. Now, you might ask, okay, I think I see where this is going, but why are there so many genealogies in the Bible? You know, this is the time of year where everyone says, I'm going to read the Bible through this year, you know. And then you get to the genealogies. If not to the laws in Leviticus, you get to the genealogies and Numbers, and you're just like, you know, do I really have to read every word? Kind of thing. Is that really, you know, this person, and if you're in the old King James Version, this person begat that person, who begat that person, who begat that person. But you think about it, there's so many genealogies in the Bible. And what in the world is that all about? So why do we think that's so? Why include those things? Is there a message that's being communicated by the inclusion of those things, of those genealogies? They're important, okay? I'm all for that. They're important. What's being communicated? What do you think, Tim?
Well, if you look at Proverbs, Proverbs gives us many sayings about how important a name is and keeping that name. Genealogy gives you the name.
Okay.
The name that you are linked to. Not just, my name's Tim, that's fine, but I'm a Basil, so that links me, and I'm a Martin, and that links me to it. Generations of different people and how important that name is in keeping it.
Okay, the idea of a name is much more than just a marker. So there's something going on that just those names represent lives that were lived, represents a period of time. What's that?
Your identity.
An identity, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. You know, and especially if you are, you know, if you share a name with someone in your family, that there's a weight that's carried there, you know. And I'm not saying it's not a happy burden, but there's a bit of a burden there that, you know, you are named for your great-grandfather, you are named for your grandmother, you are named for, you know, something of that nature. So the name, the idea of identity, it represents more than just some letters that have been strung together, but there's a life being represented there. Raymond?
I feel a need to be connected.
Okay. And I'm going to pick up on that. I'm going to write that down. That idea of connection, that when we have these genealogies in the Bible, maybe there's something going on there that's about connection. You start to say something? Airship. Okay. As in Jefferson Airplane or air, as in air. Yeah. I had, I don't know if this is 100% true or not, but one of the funniest faculty members that when I was an undergrad, there was a legend about him that one time one of the teachers, one of the other faculty members was out with, you know, baby in the baby carriage, and that this other professor was out cleaning out his car, had all the doors open and was in there, and as the professor with the baby in the carriage is walking by, he says, I see you're airing out your car. And without hesitation, the professor, so doing, said, and I see you're carting your air. No, you know, air in that sense. So this notion of an heir, you know, you've got establishing this is the person that is, in a sense, succeeding to this name. You know, to this family heritage. You've got all that going on in the Bible and in its genealogies, and thinking particularly here of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and the idea that is how people preserved their history. That each one of those names represented something more than just the person, but the period of time, and also was establishing Okay, who is the rightful next in line? It's also interesting to me that, you think about those genealogies and sometimes they are seemingly endless. Name after name after name after name after name. Let me just ask it this way then. What does that tell us about God? Pays attention to details. I like that. Cares about those people, yeah. Again, years ago at one of our tribe's schools, the legend was that it was some group of students' time to be in charge of chapel, which is always a dangerous thing, often resulting in suspensions and things like that. But anyway, that some group was in charge of chapel, and that almost as a joke, the scripture reading for that day was one of the genealogies, which, everyone is like, But, the person kind of in charge of all that kind of brought it back by going, isn't that interesting? God knows all of those people. God knows all those folks. It's almost as if by the naming of the name, there's something preserved that lets us know there's something, even when we are forgotten, as most of us have culturally forgotten our great-grandparents' names, God hasn't forgotten. The idea then of these genealogies in the Bible, they're already communicating something to us, and I think we've named some of that. Just their inclusion, boring as they may be to our modern sensibilities about reading and stuff like that, there's something interesting being communicated there. And I want us to turn and transition to an extremely important, extremely significant genealogy, one found in the first 17 verses of the New Testament. It's the genealogy of Jesus. Thought that would be somewhat significant for this time of year. And at the sake of I don't know, won't read it all because I'm not sure we're acclimated to that, but just to get a flavor of it. Matthew begins his gospel with these words, an account, that's an interesting phrasing, an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram, and Aram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nachshon, and Nachshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And then the next paragraph starts, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and it goes on from there, Solomon, and da-da-da-da-da. Josiah, verse 11, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And, verse 12, after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah, the father of Shelathiel, and goes on from there. And finally down to verse 16, and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. And then verse 17 gives us just a huge, as if the first words here, an account of. Verse 17 gives us an incredible insight into what's going on here. It says, so all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah, 14 generations. Wow, what are the odds? That immediately tells us, if we are a first century reader, that immediately tells us something is going on here, that this has been purposefully stylized, and you can go back in some of the genealogies and some of the other places in the Hebrew Bible, notice, well, wait a minute, there are a couple of folks left out here. It would be as if saying, which would be legitimate by the standards of both the ancient Near East Hebrew Bible and the Greco-Roman world, if my great-grandfather, Leroy C. York, by the way, had done something significant, which to my knowledge, other than be alive and produce many children, he did not. I don't know. I'm sure he did, but it's unknown to me 3 generations later. But if he had done something significant, then I might, in that day and time, go around and say, I might want to connect myself to his name. So even though I am not the biological son, as in next generation, of Leroy C. York, I might say, I'm Greg, I'm son of Leroy C. York. In other words, I'm connected to him, because you need to know that because maybe that makes me significant. I don't know if he did something significant. But it's interesting, you've got this stylized 14, 14, 14. Genealogies were used to communicate in these times, not necessarily to provide every literal generation, but Matthew, inspired by the Spirit, stylizes this. We got 3 sets of 14 here. And, we could get into, the symbolics of some of the numbers involved. I don't necessarily want that to be our focus tonight, because it's interesting, today. His stylings, it just feels like it's night. I don't know what. His stylings draw attention to some key figures and key events. Number 1, Abraham. Who's the second significant event or person? Well, after that he identifies, right at the beginning, he says, I'm focusing this is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, son of Abraham. Okay, interesting. So we got Abraham at the beginning, then we got David, and then we have this, he calls it the deportation to Babylon. What's our fancy schmancy one word for that? Exile. My red isn't writing well today. All right, so he says, look, you got some events and some people I want to call your attention to. By saying and starting with Abraham, immediately Jesus is attached to that promise to Abraham that goes all the way back to, I wonder if this one works, goes all the way back to Genesis 12, 1 through 3, one of the hinge texts in the whole Bible, where this promise is made to Abraham. I'm going to make you a great nation. And at this point in time, when this promise is made to Abraham, how many children does he have? 0. Okay. I'm going to make you a great nation. And the important part here for our purposes this morning, I'm going to make your family a great nation, and out of that, all the families of the world will be blessed. Immediately, by means of this genealogy, Matthew has said, you know what? This promise to the whole world, that the whole world would be blessed, and as we unpack that promise through the subsequent chapters in Genesis and what we had already been shown earlier in Genesis, it's like that promise is that God is going to undo the effects of sin, that God is going to return things to the way that they were intended in the beginning. And he says, immediately, Matthew has connected Jesus with that promise. Jesus is the fulfillment of that promise. Now, the next significant figure that he associates him with is then David. Jesus is now the blessing to all the families of the earth, but he's also connected to the royal house of David. Now, who was David? Just shorthand. He's king of Israel. Was he just an average king? No, David is thought of as the ideal king. So, Jesus now is connected to not only a promise that was made to David that one of his descendants would rule on the throne forever. Now, does that mean there'll always be a descendant of his on the throne, or does that mean one of his descendants will be the eternal king? Matthew seems to be coming down on the side of, hey, this guy, Jesus, I'm going to tell you about, he is let's use he's the everlasting king. He's the fulfillment of this promise that was made to David. He's in a sense, he is the true ideal king, the true ideal ruler. And then he talks about Jesus being someone who comes after the exile, after the deportation to Babylon. Okay, that's just kind of locating him in time, right? I'm not so sure. I think there may be something else going on here that helps to locate Jesus for us. He connects him to, shows that Jesus was shaped by all that was going on with God's people in that time post-exile. The rise of the synagogue. Where do you see Jesus going in the Gospels? When Jesus goes to worship, where does he go? The synagogues, okay? Does he go to the temple for the big celebrations? Well, yeah, absolutely, he does that. But you've got Jesus connected to, Luke tells us he goes to the synagogue there in Nazareth where he grew up, as was his custom. The written text. There is the bringing together of these texts. Jesus is clearly someone who knows the text. You think about the time that he's tempted by Satan in the wilderness. He responds with text, not just that he's proof texting, quoting scripture just because, okay, this kind of fits, let me see but this is who I am. This is part of what has shaped me. This is part of how I am seeing life, trying to see life the way God intended it to be. That idea of now, I guess we can go ahead and at this point in time start to call it Judaism. That Judaism is a people of the written text. In fact, when they come together in the synagogue, it is to hear the text read, to talk about what it means, to talk about how to put it into effect in your life. And yet something else that's going on during this period, largely, in fact, from what we would say, the prophet Malachi on, is this is largely a period in which God appears to be, really active in everything going on? It's kind of like God seems to be kind of in the background right now. And Matthew is sort of, in a sense, chronologically locating Jesus in that moment, and yet at the same time saying, okay, now all this has been at work, and we can represent it by this genealogy. All of this has been at work, and now God is speaking forth again. That now there's the arrival of the one that has been, he's the answer to the promise to Abraham. He's the everlasting king that had been promised to David. Now God is speaking forth again. It locates Jesus in just these 17 verses, these 42 stylized generations. He is actually already, if we're paying close attention, he's thrown out a lot of dots for us that he's going to spend the rest of his gospel connecting so that we get the right picture. But the dots are already out there that he's saying, this is who Jesus is. Now, what I want to do, and I think we've got time to do this, I want to draw attention to one other huge communication moment in Matthew's genealogy. And that is something that you can easily read over, even though kind of we read through it, and that is, most genealogies, so-and-so begat so-and-so, so-and-so begat so-and-so, so-and-so begat so-and-so. What's the gender of all the names? Male, okay? There are 5 women included in what Matthew does here. 5 women are included. That would have been, I think to the original readers, they would have been going, okay, something different's going on here. It's remarkable that 5 women are included, given that ancient genealogies, the genealogies in the Hebrew Bible, are patriarchal. They just are. That was the times. And I'm not sure how fully we can grasp how jarring that would be to the first readers, that they're hearing all of a sudden, wait, did he just mention Tamar? I mean, I know the story, but did he just actually mention her in the genealogy of Jesus? I think that would have been extremely jarring for people. And it's interesting because it goes through and not to, I'm not trying to just, everyone was used to, particularly in the the reading along the Greek, so-and-so agenison, and you can kind of see in there the G-E-N, the, genealogy, genes, whatever. So-and-so agenison, this name, agenison, this name, agenison, this name, and then all of a sudden, there's just this simple Greek word ek, out of, which is like much of ancient language. It's just so, just saying it like it is. A child comes ek, the mother, out of the mother. And so here is his so-and-so, agenison, so-and-so, but you got to know it's out of, in the case of our first mention of a woman here, Tamar, Perez and Zerah. Judah agenison them, but it's ek Tamar. What does that immediately recall for us? It recalls a story. Anyone remember the story of Tamar? Genesis 38. If you're going to read through the Bible in a year, you'll be there about, January 15th or so. Remember the story of Tamar? She slept with her father-in-law. Actually, it's a complicated and not